Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I am your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Rolando.
Hello.
Hard at work, training for a marathon, which is something I probably will never want to do in my life. So I'm really proud of you for this, Dom. Can't imagine what it's like to run a marathon.
Yeah, and I'm questioning why I am making myself do this silly thing.
Episode 255 got plenty to talk about today, including the inevitable closure of Google Stadia, as well as a couple of things that we missed in terms of game announcements and a follow-up to a story we talked about a while ago that kind of caught me by surprise in terms of the results of that news story. But let's get started. First off, let's talk about this Iron Man game that was announced. This happened during last week. We didn't record last week. Uh, on an official blog post on EA's website, they revealed that Motive Studio is early in development on a single-player third-person action-adventure game starring the millionaire genius playboy Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. It specifically states, quote, developed in collaboration with Marvel Games, the game will feature an original narrative that taps into the rich history of Iron Man, channeling the complexity, charisma, and creative genius of Tony Stark, and enabling players to feel what it's like to truly play as Iron Man. The blog ends with an interesting line, quote, this is an exciting new collaboration between Marvel and Electronic Arts, with Iron Man being the first of several new games. This lends credence to the rumors of the Black Panther open world game from EA, and EA's Iron Man game was also rumored for some time before officially being announced via this blog post. So I want to talk about this real quick for a couple of reasons. First, it seems like Motive is already hard at work on this. It's in early development, which is good because they're about to come to the end of the development for the Dead Space remake, because they're the studio behind that as well, which is set to release, January 13th or something like that? Early
Yeah,
January of next year.
January,
Which,
February. Oh, yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, which is super exciting. Can't wait to get our hands on that following the Callisto Protocol this December. Um, I'm glad this is confirmed. Ever since Anthem debuted their gameplay segment, regardless of how that game ended up turning out, which wasn't great, everyone was like, whoa, this looks like an Iron Man game. Like, if we could get an Iron Man game with this physics engine and the way these suits move, that would be great. And I wonder to some extent if EA maybe heard the rumblings of that and eventually were like, yeah, Anthem isn't it. Let's get a studio to make an Iron Man game, which is pretty cool. The funny thing to me, Dom, being the more comics uh, adjacent person of the two of us, is it's always funny to me when it says, like, in this paragraph, taps into the rich history of Iron Man. Sure, there's tons of awesome history for Iron Man as a comic book character throughout the years, but I think in hindsight, what people forget to realize is that before the first Iron Man movie in the late aughts, Iron Man wasn't like A tier Marvel hero. He
Really?
wasn't the X-Men. He wasn't like, yeah, he was kind of on the back burner. Like, he had his fans, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't not arguably the most popular core Avenger, maybe
Right.
second to the Hulk.
Because
But yeah,
that's how
like
I
Iron
think
Man
of him
wasn't
now.
the
Is
thing.
that yeah, that's I'm glad you bring that up because yeah, I am of that ignorant crowd because it's like the Avengers to me is that yeah, Iron Man and then Iron Man, Captain America kind of together, and then the rest really.
Exactly. And it was honestly, it was Marvel's solution to not having the X-Men, not having the rights to Hulk at that time. There was a lot of things that kind of were like, not having Spider-Man, and they're like, well, let's position Iron Man because he is, for better or worse, Marvel's Batman, right? In terms of it being kind of like a dual identity thing. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this is. I think he's a very interesting character. I hope this game leans more mature based on a lot of the alcoholism and other stuff, like traumatic stuff that he has to deal with throughout his life. I do hope they also tackle, which is one of my favorite aspects of good Iron Man stories, Dom, is when he morally grapples with the fact that at the beginning of his journey when he takes over Stark Industries, he basically supplies products of war, right? Like, he just supplies everyone, doesn't matter good or bad. Obviously, that also has a lot to do with perspective, and he has to come to terms with that he creates these weapons, and it's ultimately he who feels he has to stop those weapons from doing damage. So it's an interesting story, and I'm hoping that they nail it there. And the other thing is that, yeah, with the Iron Man game being rumored for all this time and it being officially announced, I do think this. I mean, it doesn't all but confirm it, but I think there's a strong case that the Black Panther open world game is probably real too, right?
Yeah, that feels right. Especially, do we know if like these rumors came from the same place, or is it that kind of just the
Good question. I didn't do
timing
any
deal?
research to see if they came from the same person, but they both sprung about the same time. Like they kind of
Mm-hmm.
mention each other often. Of like, not only is the Black Panther game in development, but also there's an Iron Man game, and the other one would be like, there's an Iron Man game, but also there's a Black Panther. You know what I mean? But I don't know if they came directly from the same source. But even in the fact that the blog says the first of several new games, like
Mm-hmm.
uh, also off the heels of the Skydance Entertainment announcement, it's like you don't want to
Right.
muddy up one Black Panther featured game with another one. Um, and honestly, it'd be a better pop closer to maybe the release of the new Black Panther movie, which looks phenomenal. Either way, I'm excited to have more Marvel games. I tweeted actually that I hope my one wish for Insomniac Games Wolverine game, Dom, because I know it's going to be good. I know they're going to give me a bunch of stuff that I don't even know I want, but I'll love in the moment. We have yet to see the classic Wolverine versus Hulk fight in any medium outside of animated shows or movies. Like we haven't gotten in the MCU because obviously Marvel recently got the rights to Wolverine, and we haven't gotten it in games in a major way in this new era of Marvel games. I'm sure there's like a licensed game from the mid aughts that had them fighting each other, but in terms of the new AAA budgeted Marvel games, we haven't gotten that, and I'd love that because from what Marvel Games has stated, each of these developers have free reign of the Marvel universe as they see fit, and I wouldn't be surprised if Insomniac Games approached Marvel Games was like, "Hey, could we use Hulk in our game?" And sure, why not? And I think that'd be really cool. Maybe, obviously, maybe you don't control him and it's a boss fight to some extent, but I think that'd be dope. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that there was such a classic fight. So
Yeah.
these two guys tend to not get along. It sounds like. Um,
Well, they both have
but
crazy healing factors, which make the fights interesting.
mm,
The stature difference, right? Wolverine being a very small individual, Hulk being a very large individual. Like just visually, them two fighting each other is really funny because it's like a little kid fighting an adult in some ways. Um, and yeah, if you just Google Hulk versus Wolverine, the amount of fan art and actual comic book art and comic
mm,
storylines and miniseries, it's a long thing that has been going on in comics for a long time. Like anybody who's a fan of Hulk, like we'll talk about wanting to see him versus Wolverine. It's the opposite too. Anybody who's like a diehard comic fan of Wolverine wants to see his fight with Hulk as well as like even Deadpool, which the new recent announcement of Hugh Jackman coming back as Wolverine in Deadpool 3 is really exciting. Yeah, I'm happy we're in this place with video games having high quality
huge
superhero games in a
news.
major way.
You. I can't do it as well as Ryan.
Coming Hyun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really funny because now we're also starting to see video games bleeding to entertainment in a real and meaningful way, which who would have known Sonic would be the core person there driving that home with good movies. At least there has to be some point of entertainment where Sonic outdoes Mario and fingers crossed the Mario Illumination movie is good, but it might be the case where Sonic edges him out in the movies.
So I think
We have
it's coming up next week. I don't know if it's just a teaser or a full trailer or something for that movie. It's supposed to come out, and oh man, if I'm not nervous to hear Chris Pratt.
Yeah, like out of the funny thing is the rest of the cast is pretty ridiculous in terms of matching the personalities with the characters, but
Yeah.
most of them I like them and I'm confident that they'll nail it. I think Charlie Day is the one I think which could be hit or miss, but even if it's horrible, it'll probably still be hilarious. But like Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, I think is inspired. Jack Black
Mm-hmm.
as Bowser is phenomenal. Anya Taylor Joy as Peach makes sense.
I could
Yeah, it's the
see.
Chris Pratt thing.
Yeah, I could see Jack Black doing half these characters to be honest, and it would be great.
True. Yeah. Michael Keegan Key being Toad. Uh, and the funny thing is, from a talent perspective, I do think Chris Pratt is a good voice actor. If you've seen Upward or any of his other stuff where he's done animated or voiceover work, he's good. It's first of all the controversy surrounding him in his personal life, which is a bit disturbing, but also the fact that like Mario isn't necessarily somebody who talks, and we assume he's
Mm-hmm.
gonna have an Italian accent, and is Chris Pratt the person to bring that to life? And then the other layer of like Charles Martinet is still alive. He is the voice of Mario. If you are going to go with an authentic Mario voice, why wouldn't you go with the guy who does his voice, which is also weird. Um, I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Funny, I guess.
we'll talk about I mean, one of the theories is that it's actually a Jumanji situation where it's real people that get thrown into the video game and voice the characters.
Uh,
Um, which would then make sense why Charles Martinet is also in the cast, but not as Mario, because maybe he voices the video game version. But then when all of them get thrown in,
right.
yeah, which would
That's
also make
clever.
sense. Who knows? We'll talk about the trailer next week when it reveals itself. I'm sure it'll be a point of discussion on the podcast. Another video game announcement we had, Dom, is Wild Hearts. This one's weird because in the matter of 48 hours, it went from this game being rumored to be announced to it being announced to having its release date happening in February of next year, which is wild. So,
Hearts.
did you see this at all, or is this news to you?
No.
So, Wild Hearts was rumored to be EA's competitor to Monster Hunter, which was kind of surprising. And the key art that got leaked showed a wolf, like a fantasy wolf that very much is reminiscent of Blade from or Blide from Elden Ring to me in terms of the way the wolf looks. It looks like a wolf. But what ended up happening is EA Originals has teamed up with Koei Tecmo to publish their new Monster Hunter competitor, taking place in a fantasy world largely inspired by feudal Japan. It's set to release on February 17th, 2023. It looked interesting. It's in a weird place though, Don, because we don't know if the Monster Hunter genre is popular enough to support games outside of that. We had that free to play one that came out a couple of years ago. I can't remember the name of, which might be
Yeah.
indicative of the point I'm trying to make here. But it's unclear if Monster Hunter is wildly popular because it's built that community over the decades of Monster Hunter existing, or if it's a genre that's untapped by competitors taking it serious. This game looks fun. It's weird that it's part of EA Originals. It's probably the biggest budget EA Originals game we've seen so far. The track record of that program though is pretty hit, few misses. So I wonder what the plan is here with Koei Tecmo. I don't remember if they stated if it's gonna be free to play or a full purchase. But yeah, it's weird that it came out of nowhere. There's also rumors that a new Need for Speed is coming out this December.
Ooh.
There's a lot of weird stuff happening this year with like EA and Ubisoft and these companies where they're like, even the thing we just talked about with the Iron Man game being announced, like they're not doing presentations, but they're not doing full on reveals or announcements of this game, or if they are, it's like at the last moment. And I don't know if that has to do with the uncertainty with game development in the post COVID era or what exactly is happening. Very odd. Um, yeah, and maybe this is just a
Say
byproduct of EA not having their what do they call their E3
EA
presentation every year?
Play, something like
Yeah,
that.
so it's just a bunch of scattered announcements, and maybe contractually they had to announce Wild Hearts because of the Koei Tecmo partnership. I don't know. The game looks cool though. I'm excited to see how it does. And in a world where we still don't have Monster Hunter World 2, which would get me excited, Dom, I might end up hopping into this because I have been wanting to get back into Monster Hunter, and the Nintendo Switch ones are very much more for the hardcore part of Monster Hunter. And with World, as I talked about, it was much more newcomer friendly. Um, and I've been waiting for a sequel, and it just hasn't come. So I don't know what Capcom's doing there, but hopefully this maybe scratches that itch for a lot of PlayStation and Xbox gamers like me who liked Monster Hunter World and want to get back into it, but don't want to invest into the hardcore Switch experience, which is what Monster Hunter Rise, I believe, with like its Sunbreak expansion and all of that. So
Yeah. I've been watching the trailer just now for the first time, and there's something. The way it looks, I just like it better than Monster Hunter games. Something about Monster Hunter games always kind of felt, I don't know, not childish, but sort of simple in a weird way the characters move or something. I don't know. But yeah, this game looks
it's much
really
more
cool.
Monster Hunter is much more anime, if that makes sense
Maybe
in
that's what
some
it
ways.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game looks really cool. Obviously, that wolf and all the art looks incredible. But all the art style is just a little bit feels a little bit more mature or something about it. Just looks more appealing, and then the setting too is pretty cool. Um, but yeah, this is interesting. You know, who knows why EA is doing things the way they're doing with their announcements and stuff. That's curious because yeah, and then the Iron Man game, just that throw in the Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor game and probably some other stuff. If there was a Need for Speed game too, like this, that would have been a heck of an E3 presentation just there. So yeah, maybe that's some weird contractual stuff that threw that off, or they just who knows what the deal was with that, but certainly doesn't seem like they're lacking cool stuff that they're making and planning on releasing soon. So, including this one, because yeah, I never got into any of the Monster Hunters. I tried. They had some demos. Even the Switch game has a demo, and I don't know. It just never clicked for me. But I'd be willing to give this a try too, especially if we could go on it together. I would assume that, like Monster Hunter, and from the trailer, it looked like there was a multiplayer component to this. I would assume that that's the case.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think a lot of these Western publishers might be wondering, like, see the sales numbers for Monster Hunter, and for EA, this might be a good shot to take a chance on it, because if this ends up blowing up and becoming a franchise, then EA can, give it a bigger budget and partner with Koei Tecmo even more for a sequel or expansions or whatever happens there. So I think it's a safe bet for them. And yeah, from announcement to turnaround, what is it? It's September, and this thing's coming out in February. That's wild. I mean, we're virtually October at this point. That's like what, October, November, December, like 3 or 4 month turnaround from announcement to release. That's kind of crazy.
Especially for EA, I feel like usually they want to give at least a year or a couple of years.
Yeah, and the fact this is a Koei Tecmo game and we didn't see it at Tokyo Game Show at all either. Very weird.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Speaking of Japan, though, we have a follow-up on the whole Japan Studio Team Asobi update. Do you remember when in April of this year, PlayStation shut down Japan Studio, and then they said that they'd migrate people over to Team Asobi, sorry. Well, we basically have an update on that. So following the closure of Japan Studio, who was responsible for Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, I think they're even a support studio for Bloodborne, in April of 2022, it was believed that many of its members transitioned over to Team Asobi. As it turns out of the 100-plus employees formerly of Japan Studio, it is now being reported that only around 25 of them went to Team Asobi. And it goes into, this report went into how a lot of them landed at a bunch of other studios, which is good. But it talks about how Japan and its relationship to PlayStation is in a weird place in terms of developer relationships, because a lot of these studio employees are no longer working at PlayStation partnered studios after their departure. And if you remember, when they closed the Japan studio, a part of that PlayStation basically talked about how they want to have a lot of their Japanese support for the platform be through third-party partnerships and not so much internally anymore. Very interesting stuff. We've seen, obviously, the discussions of PlayStation wanting to be a more Western-centric company alongside this stuff with Japanese developers. They're in a weird place because Japan was so central to what PlayStation is, and at this point, I don't know, it's very weird, this whole update and everything. And yeah, I don't know, I decided it'd be a nice follow-up because it is surprising that the assumption was that most of them were going to transition over, Dom, and less than 25% did.
I would have assumed like probably around half or something. Because
Yeah.
there's always, whenever something like that would happen, like you imagine that comes with some changes, whether it's the location, different
new opportunities offered from other companies, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So like people are basically kind of given a choice, like, or maybe some of them weren't though too. I guess weren't given the option to join Team Asobi or not. Maybe they just wanted, maybe they just extended that opportunity to like certain parts of Studio Japan or something. Who knows? But yeah, that is less than I would have thought based on the story from however long ago when we first heard about it. But at the end of the day, like what you can look at it of is Sony lost 75% of the talent that they had, basically, right? That's, I think, takeaway, for better or worse. Whether that fits their strategy of trying to have more Western developers or what, I don't know. It sounds like weird, potentially a bummer.
One of those things of like, why bite the hand that feeds you kind of thing. I don't know. It's very odd. But PlayStation has many very odd choices over the last couple of years. A story we're not even going to talk about today is the whole PlayStation Stars program, basically saying like, hey, if you're a member, you'll have better customer support, which is wild in and of its own right. Just a lot of odd decisions. Speaking of odd decisions, well, maybe this one isn't so odd. It was kind of going to happen regardless. Google shuts down Google Stadia. So most of the info provided in this is by Jay Peters over at The Verge. Please go read his article. It's called Google is Shutting Down Stadia. Pretty straightforward there. So after 3 years of struggling to find a dedicated player base for the impressive cloud-based gaming platform, Google has officially announced the shutting down of Google Stadia effective January 18th, 2023. Google will be refunding all Stadia hardware purchased through the Google Store, as well as all the games and add-on content purchased from the Stadia Store. Google expects those refunds will be completed in mid-January. I want to read one more thing from the official blog post, and then we can talk about it a bit, Dom, and then I have some comments from around the industry from people regarding Google Stadia. So, Stadia Vice President and GM Phil Harrison said in a blog post, quote, "And while Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technology foundation, it hasn't gained the traction with users that we expected, so we've made the difficult decision to begin winding down our Stadia streaming service," unquote. I added this in. It's important to note that Phil Harrison also played a critical role in the launch and rollout of both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox One consoles, both seen as historic low points for both Sony and Microsoft. Employees on the Stadia team will now be distributed to other parts of the company.
I don't want to focus too much on a specific guy, but I'm sure he has some good knowledge and experience. But you're batting 0 for 3, man. And if you get another huge opportunity like this, I don't know. It feels like you have some kind of special privilege, my dude, and some sort of nepotism going on. Because having been given this opportunity after your previous 2 projects having gone the way they went, how much money this must have cost Google, right? That they sunk into this and having to do all these refunds. This was a huge just waste of freaking money, and especially when the technology was strong. He was right when he said that, for sure. But we've all complained about the format and the way they were selling things. It just was not gonna work out well. We all predicted it, right? I said it maybe last a little longer. They'd try to hold on, but guess we all kind of saw it coming, especially after they shut down their own studios that they had started up after a year or something, or 2 years. That was kind of the writing on the wall before this. But man, it's kind of a bummer in a way, because I think competition is good for, I think it's good in general to have more platforms and things like that. But they made weird decisions. I think we can all agree.
But
how they're
part of their
games.
problem is it was unclear who they were even trying to compete with, right? I think that was part of the issue too. They also obviously pulled out of the publishing deals with High on Life from Squanch Games and The Quarry from Supermassive as well. This obviously doesn't fall solely on Phil Harrison. There was a lot of hands in this cookie jar in terms of why this failed. But, and to your point, yeah, you don't want to blame one person necessarily, and history is full of white dudes who fail upward, though, too, Dom.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
that was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure he's probably a lot smarter than me, but if Apple announces a gaming console and a whole division and publishing unit and all this stuff, and they put this guy in charge of it, you just throw your arms up there's got to be someone better, more qualified, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, I don't have numbers for this, but I would put money on the fact that, statistically speaking, charisma and nepotism probably play a larger role in people ascending companies than actual intelligence.
Right.
Yeah.
Not as much of a meritocracy out there as some people might have you think.
Yeah, and I wanted to go to these comments from around the industry because they all talk about different aspects of it. So I have something from Jason Schreier talking about the specifics of Stadia's investments. I have something from Tom Warren kind of defending Stadia to an extent. And I also have another one defending Stadia to some extent. So the first one is from Jason Schreier, at Jason Schreier on Twitter, from Bloomberg, obviously. He states, quote, "I reported this last year at Bloomberg, but the amount of money Google spent to get games on Stadia is so shocking that I still can hardly believe it. Even after corroborating with multiple sources tens of millions of dollars per game for Red Dead 2, Assassin's Creed, etc." So obviously they're just sinking a bunch of money into these games and not finding the player base there had to have hurt them. Google obviously has unlimited cash resources, but at the end of the day, there's profit margins that need to be met, and you got to cut the dying extremity, right?
Because Stadia wasn't just a PC; it was its own platform, and games had to be developed for it. So yeah, it wasn't just they could just move Red Dead to it; they had to do development work for that and all the other games. So that's a good point. That's a huge cost that we.
A follow-up to, in terms of investing, this story came out recently. A sequel spin-off to Death Stranding was apparently also in development in a partnership with Google and Kojima Productions, but was ultimately canceled, reportedly due to the single-player nature of the game. This isn't too surprising because before the official announcement of Kojima working with Xbox and their cloud technology, it was rumored that he actually shopped a cloud-based game to Luna, Amazon's service, as well as Google Stadia. So this makes sense. Um, it's funny that Google Stadia was the one canceling a game for it being single player and no longer EA, which is pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Next up, we have something from Tom Warren of The Verge. He said this was in a reply to a headline that on Twitter that read, "Google Stadia never mattered and it never had a chance." His response, quote, "Hard disagree. Google Stadia mattered a lot. It was key to Bungie continuing Destiny 2 development during the pandemic. It was key in pushing Microsoft to launch Xbox Cloud Gaming. Stadia might have failed, but it definitely had an impact," end quote.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. And obviously the Xbox Cloud Gaming thing is pretty apparent, and we know about that of like, yeah, these industries, these people working on these technologies kind of push each other to create the best product, and that's always best for consumers. The Destiny 2 thing, I really didn't think about because, yeah, that's when they went independent before they got purchased. Bungie got purchased by PlayStation or Sony. And, yeah, I wonder if the investment, whether how much it was, as according to Jason Schreier, tens of millions, to get that on the platform, we might not have Destiny 2 today if it wasn't for that. So, in some ways, Google Stadia kind of took the bill for everyone who wanted to continue seeing Destiny 2 and Bungie. So
all the money, like you mentioned, Red Dead earlier. So all the money Google paid to these studios to move their games, into Stadia, just kind of a nice little stimulus for the rest of the industry.
exactly. Yeah. So for better or worse. And then lastly, Tony Polanco, who writes over at Tom's Guide, he's at Romu Death on Twitter. He said, quote, "People are taking the Stadia news as a sign that cloud gaming doesn't work. GeForce Now and Xbox Cloud Gaming prove otherwise. The issue isn't with cloud gaming, it's with Stadia's horrible business model."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's true. From the first day, me and you got to try the beta for Google Stadia. Remember when we played Odyssey and how amazing it was and how it just worked?
I played
think
all
that's
of Assassin's Creed Odyssey through. It was beta at the time, so I didn't have the name, but 80 some hours or whatever, and it was phenomenal. The whole game I played, it was great. It worked well.
And that's the thing is, I don't think the point of this is no one ever questioned the actual technology, right? Like the cloud gaming stuff, it just worked and it was phenomenal. The problem is that everything surrounding that was a failure, full of poor decisions. And honestly, it has to do a lot with gamers are loyal to a fault in many ways, as well as just humans in general. This is very apparent in the fact that people complain about downloading a game off of Epic Game Store and not Steam when it's just a different launcher that you have to download for your computer. So to take that another extent and be like, oh no, this is another separate PC platform, and you're not sure how long it's gonna last, and how long are you gonna have ownership of your games? It's not tied to something you've had before. It's part of a company who has a history of canceling things. Like if you can't get people to download games off of Epic Game Store, having people go the extra mile for Google Stadia, I think the writing was in the sand, man.
And it's like when they just basically only sold games at like the retail prices. They gave away some with their pro subscription or whatever, but it was like the equivalent of PlayStation Plus or games with gold. I don't think there were any I think Destiny of course came with it, and a few of those games that are like in general more free to play multiplayer type things. But like you still had to, if you wanted to buy Red Dead, you had to pay $60, or it maybe went on sale for like 40 sometimes. But who was in there? Like all those people that warned like, well, you're gonna pay $60, you own it on Stadia, but then like what happens when Stadia goes away? Now luckily they're refunding you, but that felt like the farthest thing from ownership. Obviously even buying from the PSN or Xbox digitally, you don't technically own it either, but it feels at least a little bit closer than Stadia, this brand new
There's
thing.
a history there of you having access to those games for years on end.
Yeah, there's more precedence, and that history helps a lot. Whereas I actually think for Amazon Luna, it's set up better. You don't hear much about it, and I'm not even sure what they have on there for games, but it's just an additional subscription service. I think it's like $5 or something if you already have Prime. It's pretty cheap. And then you just get access to their list of games, and that's it. End of story. So it's more like Game Pass in that sense. cloud only though. Now I don't. They might have other issues. I've not tested that or seen how well theirs works, but I think that's probably the better business model, especially for Amazon stuff, where like people have all these other things tacked onto their Prime memberships already, music and I don't know. There's all sorts of things, but I think that is already a little bit better of a business model than what Stadia was trying to do.
Well, and even Microsoft with there's your cloud servers, which even PlayStation has invested in using now too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Microsoft
it's
is
a
like
bummer.
top at it for sure.
Exactly.
Like,
And you wonder if Google's just going to piecemeal this stuff out and sell it, right? Because that seems like the best bet of like, yeah, the technology works, just turn a profit on it that way. We'll see what happens. It's a bummer in the sense of like, I appreciate when companies are willing to do new things in the gaming space and try to introduce something new. Like if no one ever did that, we wouldn't have gotten Xbox. We wouldn't even gotten PlayStation, right? It would just been Nintendo and Sega somehow, maybe. So I'm always happy that these companies try this stuff, but there's a breaking point, and I don't know if we'll see Google try to venture into gaming in a real way for a while. And it's even unclear with Amazon Luna how much they're even invested in making that a thing. We also have the controversy surrounding Twitch right now. It's like, what is Amazon's focus really at this point? But yeah, we'll see what happens. For every Xbox console, there's always the Ouya. So for every xCloud gaming or Amazon Luna, there's a Stadia, unfortunately.
It feels like it's also too an element is like there is a big waste of time for a lot of people. Like
yeah,
like what Jade Raymond had a studio like set up and who knows what kind of projects like in the pipeline and having been worked on, and didn't even like Amy Hennig have something going for Stadia too, or did I make this up?
her list of unfortunate events is like a Lemony Snicket book out.
And so like picture like accepting these jobs and like getting all this sponsorship and funding and stuff, like this big project, and then it's just like, and then no, it's all done. Like that would suck. And then you have to basically, all that's trashed, and you probably can't bring much of it with you, and like maybe some of the talent follows you, but like it was just all for nothing. And I don't know, that's a bummer too. Like wasted time and wasted energy, and probably people burning out and just getting sick of stuff. Like I want people to be able to make the shit they want to make and it come out and people get to play it and enjoy it, and it gets a chance at the consumer. I don't know.
I'll tell you this much: the next thing Phil Harrison's attached to, if there's a betting for the under, I'm taking it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that guy's track record is the opposite of good. Let's talk about what we've been playing recently. I got an interesting one for you, Dom. So, in this point where I'm waiting for A Plague Tale Requiem to come out, obviously we're waiting for God of War in a couple of months. I'm, pattering around. I'm playing my Fortnites. I'm playing my Rocket Leagues, all of the whatever. Like, what should I hop into? Pop open Xbox Game Pass. I'm like, what looks intriguing? And this is a game you're going to have to Google, because when I explain the gameplay to you, it's going to be hard to wrap it around your head until you, like, without visual accessories to help you out. So it's called Fuga Melodies of Still, Fuga Melodies of Still. And what it is, it's a game that features anthropomorphic dogs and cats, and it's basically, the whole game serves as an allegory for World War II. You're a group of kids that find refuge in this tank, and you're trying to avoid and overcome the invading forces, which are very much German soldiers, right? They're called Berman, I think. Very much, like I said, an allegory for World War II. And the gameplay is interesting because the core of the gameplay is you're in this tank, and you travel down this line, and at each intersecting point, there's an event that happens. Most of them are like battle events, or you gathering resources or gaining health. Some of them are intermissions, and I'll explain exactly what that is later. But the primary combat is it's turn-based combat. You have 3 cannons on your tank, and each cannon has a pair of 2 kids. Each kid has a specific type of attack they can do, ranging from 3 different colors: red, blue, and yellow. I don't really need to get into the specifics, it's not that important. But each of them have relationships with one another you can build upon. And the more they work together, both in the tank and during the intermission thing, which I'll explain, their attacks become stronger, and they can utilize link attacks, which are stronger attacks as well. And every 3 turns, you can change the formation of these kids in the tank to either pair them up with different people or switch them individually. Like say, Bob and Steve, those aren't real character names. Bob and Steve are in the same canon location. Well, Bob does yellow attacks, Steve does blue attacks. The enemy you run into is actually weak to blue attacks, but the yellow attack guys in front, you can swap them, right? So there's a lot of strategy involved to have the right people attacking and using their abilities to like eliminate shields and stuff like that. The cool thing is that the intermission section of this game, it's like a 2D platformer where you talk to other members of the tank and you build relationships. And there's like events where you have to answer questions that they ask, and depending on the answer you give, determines the strength of how much stronger the relationship between them become. And it's like level based, like level 1, level 2, level 3. Each of them have distinct personalities. The game is all in Japanese with English subtitles, which is a barrier for some people. I find it quite quaint. Jesus, that's a tongue twister. Quite quaint. But yeah, it really caught me by surprise. Turn-based combat isn't necessarily my thing, but the unique take on it, where you're controlling this tank, and there's pathing that you have to choose to either take an easier or more difficult path. The enemy variety is really good. There's a lot of strategy involved of having to move around characters, use link attacks at the right time. Here's where the most saddening part of this whole thing comes, Dom. Normally in a video game, when, for instance, the tank is the main thing in this game, if that tank went to 0 health, you'd either get a game over and have to start from a checkpoint, or something would happen, right? For this game, you have a last-ditch thing called the Soul Cannon, okay? And what the Soul Cannon is it's an attack you can use when you're below 10% health that automatically wins you the match, kills everything in front of you. But it comes at the cost of you sacrificing one of the members of your tank. For each individual characters with their own personality and story and relationships, and you can choose one of them to sacrifice themselves, which is a very interesting mechanic, because it's like, yeah, you either manage your health and stuff and make sure you don't die, or you have to come to terms with the idea of killing one of your crewmates.
Sacrificing little Timmy so you can win the day. Oof.
Exactly. And I haven't met all the characters yet, but I'm having a blast with it. It's something that I haven't played before, which we often talk about, of like, trying out a new game, seeing what makes it unique. A sequel to this game was already announced as a Kickstarter game, so I'm excited about that. And from how long to beat, I think it's only like 10 to 15 hours long. And there's a bunch of other mini games in this game of like farming and going through these dungeons and collecting items. Obviously, it's apparent that the budget of this game isn't like tremendous, but I think for what they were able to accomplish it with a very unique art style. And so far, the writing has been really good, which I think is a compliment, considering, like I said, the game's totally in Japanese with subtitles, but you can even feel the emotion through the Japanese voice acting as well. Having a blast with it. We often had talked about, there's a sequel now that was announced, weirdly, Valiant Hearts 2. But Valiant Hearts is one of my favorite indie games of all time. The way that captures the emotion and loss of war, I think this very much does that as well. And I'm a sucker for anything anthropomorphic. I just like it for some reason. It's always just hooked me. So, yeah, having a blast with it. I never expected this is a game I would play, but hey, man, what is Xbox Game Pass for if not for this?
It is. I'm watching some gameplay now, and you explained it or described it like pretty on point. Which maybe just the words make it sound weird, but when you see it, you're like, yeah, these are anthropomorphic little dudes and gals like driving around. I don't even know if I would say tank. It's more like a tank house. It's like giant, huge Final Fantasy, ridiculous steampunk looking tanks. And then we should go fight the Batsis of the Burman army.
The crazy thing, Dom, is this is actually a prequel to a PS1 game, which I found out as well.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. I don't know. I'm enjoying the characters. They all feel, a lot of them are very much tropish in that there's like the large guy who loves cooking. There's like the smaller guy with glasses who enjoys like engineering. Like it's very tropish in that way, but in a very heartwarming fashion. But it's sad because the main character is the guy with the like English hat on, and he has a younger sister. And they basically, the reason they all ended up in the tank is because the forces invaded their city. Their parents basically told them to run. They ended up hiding in this tree and found this tank buried in like all of this shrubbery and stuff.
Did
And it kind of, there's like this whole other storyline of like this weird spirit that encompasses the tank. And there's this person that talks to you over the phone who you're not really sure who they are, but they're giving you advice and stuff. There's like a lot of layers to it. But the character relationships of like why they're in this predicament. There's these two little like, I want to say like either kittens or squirrels or something. They're twin brothers and sisters. And their whole thing is sad because basically you end up parking in this town and they scavenge onto the tank and are just looking for food to eat because they're starving. And you end up taking off in the tank with them and they like freak out of like what's going on and you end up coming across them and they just want to get back to their mom and dad and stuff. And there's a lot of sad aspects of that. And then you learn about the soul cannon like I talked about. It's like, yeah, just sacrifice one of these, kids who's just trying to make their way through a terrible situation so they can help everyone else survive. Yeah, it's cool, man. I did not expect it to capture me the way it has. So I'm excited to continue it.
It's not only like the anthropomorphic thing, but like, yeah, your guy's this little like mouse fox thing or whatever. But like, it's during that time period, so he's got this, cute little beret with holes for his ears to poke through, of course, and like the rest of his outfit is very old French looking or something or that kind of thing. It's pretty. Yeah, the characters are kind of adorable, and then the tank is just this monstrosity. This is interesting though. This is curious.
And once again, this is a game I would have never played if not for Game Pass. Mm-hmm. And, we talk about that often of like, yeah, I would have never given this a chance because even if I looked at the gameplay, I'm like, I don't know if I'd like that and I don't want to risk spending money on it. But with Game Pass, I'm like, this looks interesting. I'm willing to, I'll give any game that catches my eye 15 minutes, Dom. And this thing caught my eye, gave it 15 minutes. I'm like, oh no, am I in? I'm like, yeah, I'm in. So other than that, I've just been playing a bunch of random multiplayer games that I usually play. Trying to think if there's anything else of note. No, not really. Yeah, this has really just captured my attention.
I played a bit more of Knights of the Old Republic. Not too much though. Been a busier week, busier couple weeks really. But yeah, not too much more to say on that. I am getting better into it now. I'm starting to surpass that kind of barrier of this is a really old game. And it
the immersion's taking over. That's cool.
Yeah. Finally, yeah, like exactly. I'm starting to actually get into it and all that kind of like what these characters got going on. Watching Andor has actually really helped with that. I've really liked that show so far because it's, for one, very unlike any Star Wars anything so far, which might be for worse for some people, for better for others. But it's that show has started to like bring us into different places and see what else other people had going on in the Star Wars universe, whose names don't end with Skywalker. There's some characters that are familiar, but there's a lot of that going on. And so that's kind of helped me get in the mood of like getting into that universe and like seeing what else exists and being more immersed in like the different places and stories and things like that. But I still, a lot of game left there. And the reason though that I don't have much else is because I can't explain enough how good of a show Ted Lasso is, and you're about to have something in common with my wife, who's sick of hearing me talk about it, but just makes you feel really good. And I've made the proclamation today rather easily that this is absolutely the best sports show that's ever existed. I struggled to find something that I wanted to say was better. I think it's up there in like the top 5 of like best sports shows and movies. Of course, behind things like Miracle and Remember the Titans, a few others. But it just has a way of just really making you feel good, and contrasted to something like when we talked about The Last of Us Part 2. After playing that game, and you kind of feel like, yeah, that was really impactful. But I think it made me feel terrible about everything, sort of thing. Like it gives you that weird feeling. Whereas Ted Lasso, man, this show just makes you feel like, you know what? I'm okay. But everything's gonna be okay. And man, I'm smiling because these foolish British guys are playing soccer, and it's awesome. And Jason Sudeikis is there with his goofy mustache, and it's awesome. That's what I can say about it.
It's really cool that the team and AC Richmond or whatever they're called and Ted Lasso are in FIFA 23. I think it's really cool.
Yes, I saw that. That's really cool. He's so recognizable the way his character looks, so it's kind of a no brainer to put him in there. And then I was also really shocked that they had not a cameo, but like a call out where they mentioned like, oh yeah, that team over in Wrexham just got bought by Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. Like in Ted Lasso, they mentioned that.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, because it's like I don't know this for sure, but I assume that the main team in the show is fictional, but they play against other real English teams. Like I know Manchester City is a real team that are constantly playing.
Yeah, they're a fictional Premier League team, but they play against the real Premier League teams.
Yeah, at like the real stadiums and stuff, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, it's I've learned a lot about football, frankly, and like how I'm sure like it's not fully representative like most sports things are, but I think it can at least give you an idea, and it's kind of interesting to see like learn a little bit about like that kind of culture. But also that's what part of what makes the show good is obviously Ted Lasso is an American football coach who comes over and coaches, and so how he adjusts to their culture and the differences. That's what makes the show cool. So it's cool, especially I think it's good for Americans I think to watch. Any sports fans, I'd recommend.
The funny thing is Ted Lasso's been on my backlog forever, but recently something that happened in the MCU has moved it a little bit higher up for me wanting to watch it. You might not know this because you haven't watched the new Thor film yet, right?
No.
The spoilers real quick for the latest Thor movie. Thor Love and Thunder ends with the post-credit scene of the reveal of Hercules. For people who don't read the comic books, Hercules is actually a pretty prominent character in the Marvel Comics.
I never thought.
One of the actors from Ted Lasso plays Hercules in the MCU.
Which one? And
I haven't watched the show yet, so I can't tell you. But I remember when it happened, I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And the person I watched the movie with was like, "Yeah, he's actually a primary like main character in Ted Lasso." So they're like, "It's cool that he's getting his big break in Hollywood."
That guy, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
so he's gonna be playing Hercules, which is really cool. Because I really like that character, and from everyone I've heard that I trust, they say that he's really good at the way he acts. The character in Ted Lasso is very reminiscent of who Hercules is in the Marvel Comics. It's like a really good casting. So I'm excited for that, and it has me wanting to watch Ted Lasso.
Now I'm curious. So his name is Brett Goldstein, by the way. I have it Googled, but now I'm curious what Hercules is like in the Marvel Comics, because this guy in Ted Lasso is nothing like like the animated Hercules character at all. So
oh no, Hercules in the comics is not Disney Hercules.
Totally different. Okay.
Yeah, he's very much who would I compare him to? Like oftentimes he's either like the dumb lovable jock or he's just like the frat guy.
You know what? I think, and I'm going to have to look this up too. I think we killed Hercules in like God of War 3 or something.
Yeah, probably.
Kratos
I don't remember. That's been a while since I played those games.
Yeah. Anyway.
Hey man, we got Fat Thor in the MCU. We're getting Fat Thor in Ragnarok. You love to see it.
I'm so excited for Thor in Ragnarok. Like that's cool.
I love the take on Odin too, like a smaller statured, more cerebral Odin. Very fascinating to me. Voiced by the dude from West Wing, who I always forget his name.
I can't wait for that game. I'm so hyped.
Yeah, me too. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, just Ted Lasso. Just believe.
Believe, baby. Thank you guys for listening. This is episode 255 of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. If you can, please follow us on YouTube. Just search Controlled Interest. We'll pop right up. Subscribe so you never miss the podcast. Like the video so you help us with the algorithm. Comment. Let us know. Have you been watching Ted Lasso? If you have, did you enjoy it? If not, what show are you currently watching? What's your favorite sports show maybe? Other than that, you can follow us on Twitter collectively at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. You can follow me individually at Jerrad Wyche. That's my name, JerradWyche. You can follow Dom at OB Dom Kenobi, but the O in OB is the letter 0, not the number 0, not the letter O. Jesus. Cross streams. Lastly, the thing I wanted to mention, Grounded 1.0 came out. So I started that up.
Nice.
It's one of those. The one frustrating thing about playing games in beta, Dom, is that oftentimes when the full release comes out, you have to start from zero again. So the reason I didn't really talk about it is because I'm currently going through a lot of like the fundamental steps of like setting up the world and getting the crafting going and setting up a base, which is all not super interesting, and I've already done it before. But I'm curious to see all the additions they made, because the last time I stopped playing was long ago, before they added a bunch of different enemy types like bees and mosquitoes and areas, and there's a lot more to explore. So I'm excited for that. I just didn't mention it because I'm currently in the boring part because I already did it. Other than that, man, let's hope the Bears and Lions win this week. I know this isn't a football podcast, but we always got to be cheering on our teams. We'll see you guys next time with episode 256, where we'll be covering Chris Pratt's voice in the Mario movie, hopefully. Dude, imagine if they do a teaser and he's the one voice we don't hear. That'd be very interesting. That'd be a bold choice.
I think if they've learned anything from Sonic movies, get this out there as soon as you can.
So you can fix what people hate.
unless they would in no world do that, then it doesn't matter, obviously. But if you would ever consider changing something, let us hear it now so that you can frantically react and make all your visual effects artists change things and work 80-hour weeks through the movie.
The good thing with this is changing a voice in a movie, not that it's easy, but it's much easier than VFX for a character in a movie. Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see you guys next week. Hopefully we have some other news to talk about. Until then, believe.